Shalom. Okay, we are on our next video on Sipurei Siyas Mitzrayim. This will be the second video on Sipurei Siyas Mitzrayim, not including the intro. So this might actually be the third video. We had seen the Rambam on the first two halachos, and the Rambam on Perek Zayin halacha Aleph and Perek Zayin halacha Beis, sources number 1 and number 2 on your sheets. And we had seen how they had told us about the obligation to tell the story of Siyas Mitzrayim. Okay, we're going to go into some detail later on these halachos, but what I'd like to do now is just move through the sources. Okay, and this next source that we're going to see is source number 3. This is the pasuk that the Rambam had quoted. Okay, and this is the pasuk, and the pasuk says as follows. Okay, let's look at the pasuks. This is source number 3. It says, Vayomer Moshe el ha'am. Moshe says to the nation, Zachor sayom hazeh asher yisasim miMitzrayim mibeis avodim. Remember this day that you were taken out of Egypt as from slavery. Ki bechozik yad hotzi Hashem eschem mizeh v'lo yechal chametz. Because with a strong hand, God took us out of Mitzrayim, and therefore you shouldn't eat chametz. Okay, at different time, maybe on a chumash year, we see the connection between where chametz steps into that. Okay. And then we see another pasuk. That's the Zachor, right? We see the next pasuk says, "V'gara tel bincha b'yom hahu lemor." Right? You should tell your child that on this day, what should you say? Ba'avor zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeisi Mitzrayim. Because of this, and we'll get to what the this is soon. Because of this, Hashem took me out of Mitzrayim, right? And right, I said God did this for me, right? That's it was on this exact day. That's the command. Okay. Good. Those are our next two sources. Those psukim. Okay. Now those two psukim. I would like you to go back. Look at. I just want to show you why I'm bringing them in. Look at source number 1 in the end of the first line. So you see it says Shneimar Zachor Sayom Hazeh Asher Yisasim miMitzrayim. Right. That's the first pasuk the Rambam quoted. Right. That we see in source number 1. In source number 2 we find the second pasuk. Meaning in source number 2 you find source number 4. Right, the Rambam says mitzvah lo dia lebanim v'afil lo shalu shneimar v'gara tel bincha. Right, because the right. What's the Rambam's source for the fact that you have to tell your children about the story? That's v'gara tel bincha. Good. So that's those are the two psukim. Now, a lot of times, just a little methodological point here. A lot of times when we see psukim, like, okay, they prove something, right? It happens to be that the last two sugyas that we've seen, psukim, and how we understand the psukim, and the halachos that we learn from these psukim, are going to play a very crucial role in how we understand the sugya as a whole. Right? We're trying to understand the mitzvah of telling the story from Mitzrayim, right? The story of Mitzrayim. We're trying to understand what is it that we're doing exactly, right? So I know all of you are going to scream out, we're doing Pesumei Nisa. Whenever there's a miracle, we publicize the names. That's true to an extent, and this is the example par excellence of Pesumei Nisa. But don't go with Pesumei Nisa yet, because we're going to see there's something even more important here than just merely Pesumei Nisa, because in the understanding of the story and what we're doing by telling the story, we're going to understand what Pesumei Nisa is all about. But getting back to our methodological point about psukim, a lot of times we'll see a pasuk, and what we'll do is we'll sit there and say, okay, so the Rambam quoted halacha, or the Gemara quoted halacha, or the Shulchan Aruch quotes halacha, and then it quotes a pasuk to back it up. What are they doing? They're merely saying, okay, here's the pasuk, here's the halacha, and look, I'm not making this up. There's a pasuk that supports it. True. Yes, that's very true. That there is that does work. It does work that way. That's true. There's a pasuk, and then there's there's something that backs that pasuk up. 100%. Right. That's true. But right. My Rebbe taught me something, and this is Rabbi Zucker taught me, when it comes to methodology, there's always more to why they're bringing up the pasuk. What's the idea? The pasuk teaches us something. It's not merely the backup proof that we're understanding. It's not merely the idea that this is where we see the halacha. See, I'm not making it up. But the pasuk itself can teach us something. We saw that last week, and maybe I'm not sure if I mentioned it last week in Shir, because when I'm taping this, Shir is actually tomorrow on the last sugya. I know it's confusing. I'm taping this on the previous Wednesday night, so I'm not sure if we're going to mention this point. And if I do, then this is good review. But But the pasuk here, the psukim here play a central role. The Rambam quotes these psukim for a reason, and we're going to have to understand what these psukim are and understand the crucial role that they play. Okay, in the meantime, now that we understand that these are not just psukim, and there's a reason why I'm showing you where these psukim are found in the halachos, what the Rambam does with these psukim. So I want you to mark off in your mind, when it comes time to thinking of a svara, check out the psukim, because they're going to be important. Okay, now, the Rambam says let's look at source number 5. This is the law from Kriyas Shema. Remember when we used to study Kriyas Shema before all these Chagim took place, before Purim, before Pesach, right, in Maseches Brachos? So the Rambam says as follows, okay? The Rambam says in Hilchos Kriyas Shema, he says as following. Afal pi she'ein mitzvah tzitzis nohage b'layla, kornisa b'layla. The Shema, we all are familiar with this, has 3 paragraphs. The first one is Shema / Ve'ahavta. The second one is V'hayim Shamoa. And the third one we'll call Vayomer. Each of these paragraphs have a different point. Ve'ahavta teaches us about the mitzvahs and relating to God and God's existence. V'haya tells us reward and punishment for doing the mitzvahs. And Vayomer tells us about tzitzis. Now tzitzis, we're only obligated to wear tzitzis during the day. We're not obligated to wear tzitzis at night. We generally don't, rip our tzitzis off at night and say, oh, I don't have to wear tzitzis now, right? But tzitzis are not obligated at night. They're only obligated during the day. We learn that from the pasuk Urisim also. It says you should see your tzitzis. So you don't have to wear tzitzis at night. There's no mitzvah d'oraisa. There's no mitzvah from the Torah to wear tzitzis at night, right? So therefore, what might I come to the conclusion of? If I don't have to wear tzitzis at night, then what? Then I don't have to. If I don't have to wear tzitzis at night, then I don't have to. I shouldn't have to say this paragraph. So Mariv, the Shema that we say Mariv, maybe that should only be 2 paragraphs. Well, in the morning we say 3 paragraphs because it has V'afta and it has Vayomer, V'haya. So maybe Vayomer I should be able to skip because since tzitzis aren't obligatory, so too this is not obligatory. This paragraph shouldn't be obligatory. So the Rambam says don't think that way. Even though tzitzis are not obligated at night, right? Because it has zichron yusiyas. Besides, even though tzitzis are not obligated at night, we still read this paragraph at night. It's still part of the nightly Shema. Why? So he says as follows: "V'nei yeshba zichron yusiyas Mitzrayim, u'mitzvah haskir yusiyas Mitzrayim bayom uvalayla." Right? Why? Because not only does this paragraph have the mitzvah of tzitzis in it, but it also has the Exodus from Egypt mentioned. U'mitzvah haskir yisias Mitzrayim bayom uvalayla. And there is a mitzvah to read, right? There's a mitzvah to read and to mention. It says lahaskir. There's a mitzvah to be maskir, the Exodus from Egypt, bayom uvalayla, every morning and every night. Meaning that one of the benefits of reading Shema both morning and night is the following. Number 1 is that I have a mitzvah to accept the Kol Ba'asal Machal Shemayim. But number 2, I have another din. There's a second din here of being maskir Yisiyas Mitzrayim morning and night. I have to do both of them. So where do I find myself being maskir Yisiyas Mitzrayim morning and night? I find that in the Shema. If you remember, we saw that. Where do we see that? Remember, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would give a Dvar Torah. Remember, we talked about he would cover his eyes, and then he would somehow try to finagle in a Dvar Torah in the middle of his shir so that he could be Yotze Yitzias Mitzrayim every day while he gave shir. So that's the idea. Okay, so he says, Shnei where do we see this in the pasuk? L'man tiskor es yom seischa me'aretz Mitzrayim kol yamei chayecha. You should remember the fact that you left Mitzrayim every single day of your lives. Right? So right? Ukriya shalosh parshas elo al seder zui nikres kriya shema. And reading these 3 paragraphs in order, right? You can't do Vayomer first one day and then Ve'afta and then Vahaya like that hand motion. So you can't do that, right? You've got to be able to right? You have to do it in order every day, and that's the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, reading those 3 paragraphs. Right? That's the idea. So there's a mitzvah every single day to remember, and every single night to remember the Exodus from Egypt. What I'd like you to do is send me a text message now after this video right now, where you tell me exactly what the daily mitzvah in connection to Yitzias Mitzrayim is. Should be very easy if you were paying even just a slight bit of attention to be able to formulate that to me in a text. What is the daily mitzvah in connection to Yitzias Mitzrayim? Can't wait to hear from you soon.